when 19-year-old Marcus spotted a dark gray van circling Riverside Playground for the sixth time that afternoon. Every instinct he developed on the streets told him danger was near. As someone who'd been homeless for 3 years, he understood that reporting suspicions to authorities often meant being dismissed or arrested for vagrancy rather than being taken seriously. Knowing he'd witnessed a predator stalking prey, he approached a gathering of Iron Brotherhood bikers outside Rosa's cafe and spoke 7 urgent words. "That van keeps circling the children's area." What unfolded next demonstrated raw street justice at its finest. The Iron Brotherhood didn't need reinforcements. They were the reinforcements. Before I reveal what investigators discovered inside that vehicle and how these bikers responded, I want to ask you, if you witnessed something deeply troubling but knew your voice wouldn't matter to officials, would you find the courage to act? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us your location. Our community stretches worldwide, and your perspectives matter. If you stand for protecting vulnerable people regardless of the cost, subscribe now. Let's return to that sweltering Saturday at Riverside Playground. Marcus was 19, but his weathered face told stories of someone decades older. After his guardian died and social services deemed him an adult, he'd spent 3 years learning the concrete jungle's unforgiving rhythms. Marcus never panicked others and avoided confrontation. He was the neighborhood's invisible sentinel, existing in the margins of Riverside Park, a precious green oasis in an otherwise industrial wasteland. His daily presence on the same worn bench meant he noticed environmental shifts others overlooked. He recognized which caregivers were distracted by devices, which children were wanderers, and he memorized every vehicle that regularly appeared near the playground. This gray van was abnormal. It was an older Dodge with tinted windows so dark they seemed to absorb light. The temporary tags looked counterfeit even from Marcus's distance. It prowled with calculated slowness, creeping past the playground equipment at barely walking speed. Marcus had tracked it making the circuit 4 times in 90 minutes. Each pass near where toddlers played, it decelerated to an almost complete stop. Marcus's get twisted with recognition. He'd encountered predators throughout the shelter system. He recognized that energy, the patient circling of a predator waiting for isolation and opportunity. Earlier, a patrol vehicle had passed by. Marcus had stood, attempting to flag down the officer. The cop barely acknowledged him, lowering the window minimally to say, "Not interested, kid. Clear your stuff off that bench, or you're getting cited for trespassing." The cruiser departed quickly, leaving Marcus standing helpless, watching the gray van complete its 5th circuit. Marcus studied the scene across the street. Arranged in an impressive line outside Rosa's cafe sat 25 custom motorcycles. The riders occupying the patio tables belonged to the local Iron Brotherhood charter. They were boisterous, their voices carrying over urban noise, and their leather cuts displayed the skull emblem that made most civilians change their route. Marcus understood these men, not intimately, but he understood their principles. He'd witnessed them intervene in a robbery behind the cafe without involving police. He'd seen them give cash to the elderly vendor selling newspapers on the corner. They didn't concern themselves with municipal codes or loitering violations. They protected their domain, and Riverside Park fell within their domain. Marcus inhaled deeply, his pulse thundering. He adjusted his backpack straps, wiped perspiration from his face, and walked directly toward the central table where the leader sat. What Marcus doesn't realize is that his decision to approach these bikers will set off a chain reaction that exposes something far more sinister than one predator. The bikers fell silent as Marcus approached. 25 pairs of road-hardened eyes focused on him with laser intensity. The man commanding the head table was Razor, a name earned through decades, not chosen for intimidation. His salt and pepper beard and granite eyes tracked Marcus's approach with unwavering assessment. "You need something, son?" Razor's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Marcus didn't request money, didn't ask for food. He leaned toward the table, his voice sharp and urgent, cutting through street noise. "Gray van. Fake tags. 6th time around the playground. Someone's hunting for a target. Police won't hear me out, but I'm telling you, there's a predator working." Razor remained motionless for 4 heartbeats. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss the homeless teenager. He followed Marcus's gesture toward the park entrance. At that exact moment, the van reappeared, tires crunching gravel slowly. It slowed near a 4-year-old girl who'd wandered from her father to retrieve a dropped toy. Razor didn't finish his meal, didn't address his brothers verbally. He simply stood, and as though controlled by collective consciousness, the 24 other riders stood simultaneously. The scraping of chairs against pavement sounded like preparation for battle. "Crusher," Razor said, eyes locked on the van. "Block the northern route. Bear, take the southern exit. Everyone else, we're establishing a perimeter. That vehicle doesn't leave until we know what's happening inside." Instantly, the peaceful afternoon transformed. The bikers moved with terrifying, practiced coordination. Within 45 seconds, 25 engines roared to life, a sound wave that sent birds exploding from nearby trees. Marcus watched, breathless, as the Iron Brotherhood operated like a special operations team. The van's driver recognized his mistake too late. As he accelerated toward the park's exit, Crusher's massive touring bike swung sideways across the roadway, creating a barrier. Simultaneously, Bear and 4 others positioned behind the van, trapping it completely. The vehicle sat caged by chrome and leather. Razor approached the driver's window deliberately. He carried no visible weapon. His presence was weapon enough. 25 bikers surrounding a vehicle crushed any resistance. Razor rapped the glass with a heavy knuckle. "Lower it," Razor commanded. The window descended 3 inches. A man's voice, pitched high with nervousness, emerged. "I haven't violated any laws. You're harassing me. I'm calling authorities." "Authorities ignored our friend Marcus," Razor replied, gesturing toward the teenager on the sidewalk. "But we're excellent listeners. Explain why you're circling children. Why counterfeit registration?" "Just searching for an address," the man stammered. 6 circuits around one playground isn't address hunting," Crusher growled, pressing close to the glass. "That's target selection, and we recognize what you're shopping for." Razor didn't wait for explanations. He reached through the partial opening, grabbed the interior lock, and yanked. The door swung open, revealing a man in his early 40s who appeared unremarkably ordinary, except for sweat streaming down his face and binoculars resting on the passenger seat. What occupied the rear cargo area froze everyone's blood. Industrial duct tape rolls, heavy-duty zip restraints, and an assortment of brand-new children's toys still in packaging. The bikers didn't require legal proceedings. They recognized exactly what they were witnessing. "Marcus," Razor called, his voice deadly calm. "Come here." Marcus approached, his eyes widening as he observed the kidnapper's toolkit scattered throughout the vehicle. Nausea hit him like a physical blow. If he'd remained on his bench, if he'd stayed silent, one of those children would be inside this van. "Is this the vehicle?" Razor asked. "Yes," Marcus whispered. "That's him." Razor turned back to the driver, now sobbing and pleading. Razor didn't strike him, unnecessary. He simply regarded the man with disgust, so profound it seemed tangible. "You'll sit exactly here," Razor stated, "and wait for police. Because this time, they'll listen. And if you consider moving, if you even glance at those children again, my brothers won't maintain this politeness." Razor addressed his crew. "Crusher, contact that detective we know at the 5th Precinct. Tell him we've got a present. Tell him a homeless kid accomplished his department's job today." As sirens wailed in the distance, playground parents began comprehending what had occurred. Mothers clutched children, staring at the van, then the bikers. A profound silence blanketed Riverside Park, a silence of terrible understanding. The intimidating men in leather had been their only true protectors. But as police processed the scene, Marcus has no idea that the man in the van is just one piece of a much larger, deadlier operation, and that by exposing him, Marcus has just painted a target on his own back. The arrest at Riverside Park sent tremors through the city's underworld. While local media celebrated the anonymous hero and vigilante bikers who saved children, a far more dangerous entity watched the coverage with cold, methodical fury. The van's driver wasn't merely a predator. He was an acquisition specialist for a sophisticated human trafficking network, a phantom organization that prided itself on invisibility within urban chaos. By identifying that gray van, Marcus hadn't just rescued a few children. He'd compromised a multi-million-dollar operation scheduled for that weekend. The syndicate didn't tolerate loose ends, and they certainly wouldn't accept humiliation from a homeless teenager and a motorcycle club. Marcus's first night at the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse felt surreal. For the first time in 4 years, he wasn't sleeping with hypervigilance, listening for threats or scavenging animals near his cardboard shelter. He occupied a real bed in a room smelling of motor oil, aged leather, and pine. He was protected by men society labeled criminals, but whom he now recognized as the neighborhood's genuine defenders. As he lay there, the silence was almost overwhelming, the kind of silence that only exists when you finally feel secure. However, that peace shattered by Monday morning. The clubhouse atmosphere had shifted from celebratory to combat-ready. Razor was conferring in the strategy room with Crusher and Bear, examining encrypted messages and grainy surveillance photographs captured by the clubhouse's security cameras. Someone had been circling their location, not with the clumsy approach of the child snatcher, but with the surgical precision of professional operators. "They're hunting the kid," Bear snarled, slamming his fist on the wooden table. "They've obtained his description from the park. They know Marcus blew their operation, and they want to send a message citywide. Nobody interferes with the syndicate. They've been probing our digital perimeter all night, testing our security depth," Crusher added. "This isn't just revenge. It's an intimidation campaign." Razor studied Marcus, who stood in the doorway clutching a coffee mug. The teenager looked rested, but the wariness hadn't left his eyes. "Marcus, come here," Razor commanded, his voice gentle but weighted with authority. "You did something courageous, but in this city, courage carries a price. The man you caught was a minor player in a vast criminal ocean. Currently, the dangerous players are circling because you cost them substantial money. We've identified 4 different surveillance vehicles near our perimeter in the last 18 hours. They're not hiding anymore. They're challenging us to respond." Marcus didn't flinch. Street survival had burned away his fear years ago. He'd already confronted the worst reality offered. "If they're coming for me, let them come. But they won't stop with me, will they? They'll keep taking kids from that playground until someone destroys their entire operation. I've seen them before. Not just a van, but a blue sedan and a white truck. They work from the warehouse district. I've watched them swap license plates under the overpass." Razor's eyes sparked with renewed respect. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. We don't just defend our walls, Marcus. We take the fight to their gates. You spotted that van before anyone else in the city. You have an eye for patterns. Can you help us locate their base of operations? If we wait for them to strike us, we've already lost. We need to hit them where they operate." For the next 9 hours, Marcus worked with the club's technology specialist, a biker called Static. Together, they traced the van's route using access traffic cameras and Marcus's encyclopedic knowledge of the city's hidden passages and abandoned spaces. Marcus's mind functioned like a living map. He recalled seeing that same gray van parked near an abandoned refrigeration warehouse in the industrial zone near Dock 23, a location homeless people avoided because of armed security patrolling with dogs. He described the guard shift rotations, the fence's blind spots, and the precise timing when the heavy steel doors opened for truck access. "There," Marcus pointed at a flickering screen showing a grainy overhead image. "Dock 23. They move vehicles in and out at 3 a.m. when harbor fog is densest. They think fog conceals the movement, but I've watched from the abandoned shipyard's rafters across the water. I've seen them transferring crates that didn't contain cargo. I've heard crying. Razor, this isn't one van. It's an entire factory." Marcus has just revealed the location of the syndicate's primary operation, but infiltrating a fortified warehouse guarded by armed professionals seems impossible, until Marcus volunteers for a suicide mission that will either save dozens of lives or cost him his own. Razor studied the map and nodded gravely. "That warehouse is a fortress. If we approach through the front entrance, it'll be a massacre. They'll have time to relocate their cargo out the rear. Or worse, use the children as hostages. We need a ghost. Someone who can bypass the thermal sensors and motion detectors calibrated for adult body weight." I'm your ghost, Marcus said, stepping forward. I know that warehouse's ventilation system. I hid in those ducts during winter of 2023. There's a narrow shaft running from the roof, directly to the central control room. If I can infiltrate, I can disable the electronic locks on the side loading doors and let you inside. I've done it before for warmth. I can do it now to save lives. Crusher looked at Razor, shaking his head. It's a suicide run, Razor. He's 19, not a trained operative. If they catch him in those vents, he's trapped like prey. We can't ask this of him. I was trapped the moment I saw that van, Marcus countered, his voice carrying conviction that silenced the room. I'm the only one who fits in those vents, and I'm the only one who knows their camera blind spots. Let me do this for the kids who didn't have someone watching their playground. For the 19 years I spent invisible, let me finally be seen for something meaningful. The approach to Dock 23 was a masterclass in coordinated silence. 40 motorcycles moved through industrial shadows like hunting wolves, engines tuned to low growls, headlights darkened. They parked 3 blocks away in an alley, advancing on foot with practiced stealth. Marcus separated from the group, his lean frame vanishing into shadows of a corroded fire escape. He scaled the structure with the agility of someone who'd spent his life climbing barriers to find shelter. Inside the ventilation shaft, the air was stagnant, tasting of brine and oxidation. Marcus crawled through the narrow metal passage, his heart pounding frantically against the sheet metal. Below him, through the vent slats, he witnessed the horror the city had permitted to grow in its blind spots. Dozens of children were confined in makeshift plywood cells, guarded by men carrying military-grade rifles with cold, indifferent eyes. He heard guards laughing about their payment, discussing the children as if they were merchandise. At the floor's center stood a man in an expensive navy suit, the coordinator. The buyer arrives in 15 minutes, the coordinator commanded, checking a platinum watch. Load the trucks. And if that homeless kid or those bikers are discovered anywhere near here, I want them eliminated permanently. He's the reason we had to accelerate the schedule. I want this floor cleared before sunrise. Marcus reached the central control panel near the side loading door. His hands trembled as he extracted a small toolkit Razor had provided. He bypassed the security mechanism, a technique he'd practiced for hours in the clubhouse basement. With a soft mechanical hiss, the massive steel doors began sliding open, admitting cold harbor air and 40 Iron Brotherhood members into the structure. The guards turned, startled by the sudden light influx and the thunder of boots hitting concrete, but reaction came too late. The Iron Brotherhood didn't enter with polite warnings. They came like an overwhelming force of leather and steel. Razor and Crusher led the assault, the roar of their entrance echoing off the high metal ceilings. The warehouse erupted into controlled chaos. The traffickers, caught unprepared and facing a Brotherhood fighting with primal protective fury, began breaking and fleeing. The sound of flashbangs and shouting filled the cavernous space. Marcus didn't remain in the vents as instructed. He saw the coordinator grabbing a young girl from the nearest holding area, using her as a human shield while backing toward a high-powered speedboat docked at the warehouse's internal pier. The coordinator's eyes were wild with desperation. "Release her!" Marcus screamed, dropping 12 feet from the vent and landing on wooden crates. He didn't carry a gun, but he'd grabbed a heavy pipe wrench from the control room. The coordinator sneered, leveling a compact pistol at Marcus's chest. "Well, the little ghost from the park, you've cost me millions. You think you're heroic? You're just an error in the system. I'll take your life as compensation for my losses." Before the coordinator's finger could tighten on the trigger, a heavy silver chain wrapped around his wrist, jerking his arm violently upward. Razor had moved through the crossfire like a phantom, his eyes burning with lethal intensity. With one devastating strike, Razor sent the coordinator crashing through the railing into the oily harbor water. The girl was pulled to safety by Marcus, who held her protectively as the chaos subsided. Within 30 minutes, the warehouse is secure. But the aftermath of this raid will expose corruption reaching into the city's highest offices, and Marcus's life is about to change in ways he never imagined. Within 40 minutes, the warehouse was secured. Police, alerted through a secure line from the clubhouse, arrived to find 40 bikers standing in a protective circle around the rescued children. The traffickers were zip-tied in a humiliating row on the cold concrete floor. The operation scale was staggering. Records showed hundreds of children had passed through this port. The coordinator was hauled from the water, shivering and defeated, his empire of misery in ruins. The police lieutenant who had dismissed Marcus days earlier entered the warehouse, his face draining of color as he comprehended the horror Marcus had uncovered. He observed the holding cells, then Razor, and finally Marcus, who sat on a crate wrapped in an Iron Brotherhood jacket, sharing his water bottle with the young girl he'd saved. The lieutenant removed his cap, a gesture of profound humility nobody in the room expected. He approached Marcus, ignoring the bikers for the first time in his career. "I owe you more than an apology, Marcus. I looked at your worn clothing and saw a problem, not a person. I saw a nuisance requiring removal, while you saw a crime demanding action. Because of you, because you refuse to be ignored, these families will sleep whole tonight. You're a better officer than I am." Razor stepped forward, placing a massive protective arm around Marcus's shoulders. "He isn't just a kid anymore, Lieutenant. He's a lion, and he's our family now. If you ever look through him again, you're looking through all of us. He's the eyes of this neighborhood now." The story of the Lion of Riverside Park became a legend that transformed the city's relationship with its marginalized population. The trafficking network was dismantled from top to bottom, leading to arrests that reached into government offices and corporate boardrooms. The city council attempted to organize a public ceremony to present Marcus with a Valor Medal and ceremonial key to the city. But true to his nature, he didn't attend. He didn't want recognition from a system that had ignored him for 19 years. He wanted the reality of the life he'd earned through blood and courage. 6 weeks later, the Iron Brotherhood held their own ceremony in the private, sun-drenched courtyard of the clubhouse. They didn't offer Marcus a patch. He had his own path to walk, and they wanted him to remain independent for his future. Instead, they handed him keys to a small, beautifully renovated apartment located directly above Rosa's Cafe, where they met every morning. Accompanying the keys was a thick, official-looking envelope, a full scholarship to the State University's Criminal Justice and Social Work program, funded entirely by the club and grateful neighborhood parents. "The world needs eyes like yours, Marcus," Razor told him as they stood on the clubhouse balcony, watching sunset over a peaceful, vibrant riverside park. "You saved those kids because you understood exactly what invisibility feels like. You gave them a voice when you didn't even have one yourself. You transformed your pain into a shield for others. Never let the world make you blink, and never let them convince you that you don't belong." Marcus looked down at the playground. The gray van was a memory, replaced by sounds of children playing safely and parents who finally felt the shadow lift from their lives. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a guardian, a symbol of what happens when the forgotten choose to fight back. Every Saturday, a row of 25 motorcycles would park outside the cafe, and the biggest, toughest men in the state would share coffee with the young man who had whispered the words that changed everything. Marcus had found his pack, and the city had finally learned how to see its own people truly. The invisible had become undeniable, and the streets had one more guardian watching over those who couldn't watch over themselves. If this story moved you, remember that real heroes walk among us every day, often in the places we're trained not to look. Subscribe to hear more stories of courage from unexpected places, and share this if you believe everyone deserves to be seen.